Alright, so this video is more than just a trade idea that almost happened. This video I wanted to serve more as a landmark instead as well. A video where we can go back to in a few years and say, alright, this trade idea was on the block, they discussed it before one or maybe both teams, either or, backed out of the discussions, and eventually we can look at this in a few years and say, alright, had we made this trade, who knows how things could have been if you looked at it with hindsight. So, today we're talking about Nate Schmidt once again. I know, Vancouver fans, I know! It sucks always bringing this guy up because of how poorly the relationship ended with the Vancouver Canucks and their hockey team, but we're talking about Nate Schmidt here, and one of the other hypothetical trade scenarios that kind of made its way out there into the media and onto our local airwaves in the form of the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, if you don't know the story, Nate Schmidt was a Vancouver Canucks defenseman acquired last year in the Vegas Golden Knights trade. The Golden Knights ended up giving up Schmidt and his just under $6 million salary because they needed to sign Alex Pietrangelo. The Vancouver Canucks gave up a third-round pick in that deal in a move that a lot of people said was somewhat of a steal for Vancouver because Nate Schmidt was a 30-point guy on the right-side defense who could rush the puck up, and right-sided D-men are pretty valuable assets. Now, Schmidt is not right-handed, he's just a right-sided D-man who plays on the right side despite being left-handed. But he was still seen as a valuable point-producing machine. Lo and behold, the 2021 Canucks season happened, it sucked, and the relationship with Nate Schmidt really did end off on a bad note. We made an entire video about that, by the way, if you want to go ahead and check out an extended look as to that. But the Vancouver Canucks traded Nate Schmidt over to the Winnipeg Jets for, guess what, a third-round pick in 2022. So essentially, they just made a lateral move where they gave up a third to get a third, and they had a year of Schmidt in order to see that go through. But ultimately, Nate Schmidt to Winnipeg was not the only trade idea that was discussed. We had ourselves a few tweets coming out over the past few days discussing other options for the Vancouver Canucks in a potential Nate Schmidt trade. Let's go over onto Taj's Twitter account over here. He said this, some tidbits from Rick Dhaliwal on the July 19th edition of the Donnie and Dolly Check Show. Philly was interested in Schmidt before they traded for Ryan Ellis. Now, where exactly does this come from? The Philadelphia Flyers are a team that really bolstered their D-core this offseason. They got rid of Shane Gostisbehere, and it cost them a boatload of assets to do that, and they got rid of Philippe Myers, who is a young right-handed defenseman who was going to be a star in this league who just didn't really break out into that mold just yet. But guess what else they did? They acquired Ryan Ellis from the Nashville Predators in a three-way trade involving Cody Glass and Nolan Patrick. It was a weird swapperoo of all these assets over here. That was the trade where Philippe Myers was sent away, by the way. And they also acquired Rasmus Ristolainen from the Buffalo Sabres. So the Philadelphia Flyers really went out there and they pretty much sent out Gostisbehere and Myers. They got Ryan Ellis and they got Ristolainen. Yeah, that D-core is a little bit better, I think. And so hearing this idea from Rick Dhaliwal that the Flyers were also interested in Nate Schmidt before the Ryan Ellis acquisition is a pretty interesting one to me, and one that ultimately does make quite a little bit of sense, because hey, Ryan Ellis is a guy, he's a right-handed D-man, Rasmus Ristolainen is a guy, right-handed D-man, Nate Schmidt, not right-handed, but he does play on the right side, so he technically does count as a right-sided D-man. He does kind of align with what it was the Philadelphia Flyers would have asked for. And so, when I think about just that idea by itself, okay, Nate Schmidt, Philadelphia wants him, what happens then? You take a look at what actually happened. The Ryan Ellis trade saw the Flyers essentially just give up Philippe Myers and Nolan Patrick while getting Ryan Ellis in return. Cody Glass, Nolan Patrick, they were swapped around as well, for some reason or another. But disregarding the Glass and Patrick swap between the Predators and the Golden Knights, it was essentially Myers and Patrick for Ellis. Now, this is where Elliotte Friedman comes in and reintroduces the topic with the Vancouver Canucks. Friedman went on to Sportsnet 650 on July 20th, and this is a quote from the broadcast. Friedman says someone mentioned to him a while ago that the Vancouver Canucks had interest in Nolan Patrick for Nate Schmidt. And so, you think about this trade right here, Nolan Patrick. Oh boy, he's a guy that we have spoken about a ton on this YouTube channel before. He was in a position where he didn't really have a super successful development curve in the Philadelphia Flyers system. He was drafted 2nd overall in 2017 after being projected to being a 1st overall talent for a good chunk of 2016 and the beginning parts of 2017. He was just taken out with injury the entire year. And so, Nolan Patrick being taken 2nd overall in Philly was seen as a pretty big gift because you're getting a really good talent. You lucked into winning the lottery for 2nd overall, and what happened after that? Well, Nolan Patrick didn't really ever produce to 2nd overall caliber standards. Sure, he made the NHL right away, and he was okay, but he never really broke out, and he had more injury problems, more shuffling up and down in the lineup. He wasn't really ever established as the star that people thought he would be back in 2017. And it was made even worse by the fact that you take a look at who was taken immediately after Nolan Patrick. Miro Heiskanen, Cale Makar, Elias Pettersson, young stars in today's NHL. As a result, the Philadelphia Flyers put Nolan Patrick in a position where, hey, you're a 2nd overall pick, come on, when are you going to put it together? And to be fair, everybody thought he would have been able to put it together. Even back to when he was like 16, 17 years old in the WHL, people thought that he had this extraordinarily high ceiling. And so, obviously, the pressure was pretty high. Eventually, things got too high to the point where Patrick himself said, nah, I don't want to be here anymore. And we made the video talking about his entire sentiment according to the rumors and the insiders leaking out the information saying that, yeah, Patrick would want a fresh start somewhere else. And so you have yourselves a guy who has produced 9 points in 52 games last season. His career high is 31 points in 72 games, and that was 2 years ago. And what? He's 22 years old, still trying to develop into a good star in this league. I don't want to write him off. He's only 22, as I said. But he's now in a Vegas Golden Knights system where they kind of do need some center depth. And Cody Glass is gone in that team, so this is really the opportunity that Nolan Patrick could use to go out there, not really have all the pressure in the world anymore, and to just be a guy playing hockey. Going back to the fundamentals, doing what it is that makes him a successful player, or what made him a successful player in the past, and I, for one, was a really big fan of the sheltered role that being in Vegas provides. Now, for Vancouver, it makes sense to me why they would have wanted to acquire a guy like Patrick. Now, hear me out. I know Nolan Patrick doesn't have a good rep amongst a lot of fans right now, and I know that he currently needs a contract. But you know who else needs a contract right now? Jason Dickinson. The Vancouver Canucks would have essentially wanted to get Nolan Patrick from the Flyers for Nate Schmidt to get their third-line center. Now, the problem is, Jason Dickinson is really good defensively. He's really good in the PK, and he can contribute once in a while. He's like a 20-point, 25-point guy in the NHL at best. But Nolan Patrick doesn't really do either of those anymore. When Nolan Patrick was draft eligible, a lot of people saw, okay, two-way capabilities right there. He can produce points, he can be really good in the PK as well, but he just hasn't established himself as that guy to really translate into the NHL in that way. And for the Vancouver Canucks, I mean, with Jason Dickinson, you're getting a guarantee. Dickinson gives you the opportunity to say, okay, we are on a penalty kill. Go out there, Dickinson. Do what it is that you do best, because you're already at this level. You can already shut down NHL power plays and do a good job at it. Patrick isn't there yet. And so for the Vancouver Canucks to trade away a third-round pick in 2021, and then trade away Nate Schmidt for a third-round pick in return, you're pretty much accomplishing the same kind of thing here, just with the swappage of the third, aren't you? Because the alternate situation would have been, okay, you just trade Schmidt for Patrick straight up, you keep the third from this year, and you don't get the third from next year from Winnipeg. So things just kind of stay. Now, the Vancouver Canucks ultimately did not do this trade, but it does make sense to me as to why they would have wanted to do it, and I just kind of highlighted why. So talk to me in the comments what you think about this entire idea over here. The Vancouver Canucks thinking about doing Nate Schmidt for Nolan Patrick, with all the context behind it with both of these teams and what their goals were in this offseason, it makes perfect sense to me. Philadelphia was looking for an extended look on their right side. They got that with Ryan Ellis. They got that with Rasmus Ristolainen. They had to give up Gostisbehere and Myers to do that, but the alternative is they would have gotten rid of Gostisbehere, they would have probably kept Philippe Myers, and they would have had Nate Schmidt to add on to there, and they could have gotten Ristolainen as well because the assets they gave up for Ristolainen just included draft picks and whatnot. So for Philly, it makes sense. They could have also kept Nolan Patrick as well, but they had to give him up in that Ryan Ellis trade. And for Vancouver, the Nate Schmidt trade over to Winnipeg was for a third-round pick. They acquired Dickinson as well for a third-round pick, and he would have been the guy that Nolan Patrick could have replaced in the lineup should that trade have been made. Talk to me in the comments if you enjoyed. This was Ash Rolls 99, and bye.